We are above the Atlantic Ocean, this time flying west back to the United States of America. I'm Guy Benson, joined by Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor. Let's start with your impressions of this trip. I know you had a number of goals that you outlined on our way over. How do you feel about how everything went?
Well, I think it was a great trip. There were a couple of real honors. To spend Bastille Day and the Bastille Day celebrations with our French colleagues to celebrate their revolution and their belief in liberty and equality and fraternity, and to be there with the French choir singing with their healthcare workers their national anthem at the end of that ceremony, and to show our support for our French colleagues and to be invited to that ceremony with our ambassador Jamie McCourt was a real honor. We also had a great day yesterday, and we were able to go to one of the American battlefield monuments and cemeteries where our fallen heroes who fought in World War I in Belleau Wood, the Marines and soldiers who fought there were buried, and to pay our respects to those great Americans, young men who left their careers and left their families and left college and left their farms and factories to go fight for freedom. That was a special opportunity to be able to represent the president and lay a wreath at the cemetery. So those are two of the things that will always stand out and that I'll remember for a long time. And then we had excellent meetings with our colleagues on policies that today are keeping America safe and keeping our allies safe.
I want to circle back to the cemetery visit yesterday, but big news this trip from the UK on Huawei. The administration has been pushing very hard for that decision. I asked you about it on the way here. Then the announcement came down, or at least reports that it is coming. I wonder how you feel that news might be welcomed in Hong Kong, because I feel like so many of those people feel very concerned, obviously, about their liberty, and to see not just now the United States, but the UK as well, really taking a difficult, in some ways painful stance against China, that has to be a morale boost to the people who actually care so deeply about their liberty on that island.
Well, I think it's great for the people of Hong Kong, and it's while we were away, the president signed a very strong executive order supporting the people of Hong Kong, and you know, laying out the policies that we're going to take to counter China's actions and taking away the liberty and the freedom of the people of Hong Kong 27 years before they said they would. We had a system that was supposed to be one country, two systems. That was a solemn promise the communists had made to the people of Hong Kong, but also to the people of the UK. They violated that promise, and that's a very sad thing. It's a sad thing to watch that happen. And it was just like it was sad to see the Russians take Crimea. I mean, these are echoes of an earlier time in the 20th century, and a more dangerous time. So it was great to see the UK stand with us on Huawei and protect their citizens, protect the British people from Huawei. And I think we've made a lot of progress during our meetings with other European countries. I think you're going to see a lot less Huawei in France, a lot less Huawei in Italy, and ultimately I think most European countries will go with trusted providers when it comes to telecom and 5G. And that's great for our allies. It's also good for the American people, and ultimately it's good for the people of China, who are great, hardworking people, but they're governed by a communist party that doesn't believe in freedom or liberty or the rule of law or our values.
Broadly speaking, having met with the so-called Quint, also the Dutch, do you feel like our allies in Europe are at least relatively clear-eyed when it comes to China and the threat, short, medium, and long term?
I think people all over the world are awakening to the challenge of China. There's no silver lining to this COVID crisis where we've lost this pandemic, where we've lost 130,000 Americans, and that toll is going higher and higher. We'll never be able to replace those lives, and our economy's been destroyed. But one of the results of the crisis is that people around the world, both in our country and among our allies, have woken up to the threats and the challenges posed by China and by the Chinese Communist Party, which governs the People's Republic. And I think we're seeing that in Europe, and I think we're going to have very strong concerted action among the United States and our allies in Western Europe and also in Asia to counter the malign activities of the Communist Party, whether it's Huawei or their failure to cooperate in pandemic responses, or their theft of intellectual property, or their more aggressive militarism, whether it's in India or the South China Sea or bullying Taiwan.
Roughly 2 years ago, President Trump pulled the United States out of the so-called Human Rights Commission at the United Nations. Last week, that same commission voted almost by a 2-to-1 margin to endorse China's power grab in Hong Kong. Some of our allies voted no, but it was almost 2-to-1, as I said. Does that confirm the correct decision that President Trump made in your mind to disentangle the United States from a human rights body that almost seems farcical?
Yeah, I mean, this takes farce to a new level, and the United States, as I wrote in an op-ed just recently in the New York Post, we just can't be, if we can't reform some of these international organizations, if we can't end the corruption, if we can't end the bullying of democratic countries, we just can't support them with our funds or with our participation, because by participating we endorse their conduct. The Human Rights Council in Geneva has become a total joke. You know, it's beyond irony that the Human Rights Council would endorse the Chinese taking the liberty away from almost 10 million people in Hong Kong. That body exists now basically as a forum to condemn our ally Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, and to condemn America and its allies. And it's, as you mentioned, Guy, your description of it as being a farce is right on point. And I think President Trump made the absolute right decision to disassociate ourselves with that sort of a body.
Briefly, I want to ask you about North Korea and Venezuela. The Trump administration had some pretty bold action. I think their supporters would call it that. Others would say, a new look at diplomacy. And I think many Americans are wondering what's actually happening with U.S. policy with North Korea. It seems like things may have stalled there. Maduro's still in power in Venezuela. What's the situation? How's the Trump administration viewing those two countries right now?
Well, let me take them in turn. With North Korea, the president, at a very dangerous time when he took office, engaged with the North Koreans. President Obama told him that was when he took office, that was the most dangerous situation for us in the world, that it was likely that we were going to go to war with North Korea. The president has avoided a war with North Korea, and he's done it through two means. One is peace through strength. Early in his administration, he made it clear when the North Koreans rattled their swords that he was prepared to take strong action against North Korea. And he was criticized for some of the rhetoric, but it had an effect. He also sent 2 carrier groups to the Yellow Sea and into the Western Pacific as a show of force, that to let the North Koreans know that America would not be bullied and that we were prepared to defend our interest. At the same time, President Trump opened up a dialogue with the North Koreans and has developed a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. They're very different people and come from very different places. But the president's believed by talking with the North Koreans, while at the same time showing strong actions through rebuilding our military and sanctioning North Korea in a way that it's never been sanctioned before with maximum pressure, we could have the effect of limiting some of the damage that North Korea does. So, to his credit, and great credit, President Trump has been able to forestall nuclear tests and forestall long-range missile tests, and he's done it for 3.5 years. We'll see if that continues. And but right now, it's working. What we really want to see is Kim Jong-un honor the commitment he made in Singapore and denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and get rid of his nuclear weapons. If he did that, North Korea could have a fabulous economy. It could be a great country. The Korean people, as we know from watching South Korea, are hardworking. They're smart. They're an amazing people. And so if Kim Jong-un would get rid of his nukes and allow North Korea to open, the potential there is almost limitless. With respect to Venezuela, we've engaged in a maximum pressure campaign. Maduro is an illegitimate leader. He's a narco-trafficker. He's been indicted by the Justice Department, and the U.S. is going to continue to take all action necessary to isolate him. The fact that Iran and North Korea are embraced in these trade efforts shows the level to which both nations have fallen as they try and stay afloat. But we think they're two drowning men that are clinging on to each other and are going to pull themselves further down into the water and not save each other. So we're pleased with the Maximum Pressure campaign. Juan Guaido is the legitimate president of Venezuela. He's been recognized by over 50 countries. Almost every country in this hemisphere has recognized him. And we're looking forward to a day when that wealthy, prosperous, amazing country of Venezuela is free and can get out from under the shackles of Maduro and socialism and dictatorship, which has driven them into poverty and famine and a very sad state.
Last question, back to the cemetery visit. Row after row of white crosses and Stars of David, young men, Americans killed more than a century ago. I watched you stood as the national anthem played, then you descended the steps from the memorial and taps played. What goes through your mind? You're the National Security Advisor of the United States. You're focusing every day on the here and now and the present. And then all of a sudden you're there to honor people who came long before any of us. I just wonder, what's that like for you, given your position?
Well, you think about all those crosses and Stars of David, and you wonder where these young men came from. And as President Reagan said, you realize that they come from the small towns and the farms and the factories and the cities, of all races and creeds, and they're cut short in the prime of their life. And we actually had the opportunity to see some of the photos of some of the men who were buried in that cemetery, and handsome young men who had left college or left their farms or left their towns to go fight for freedom abroad. And you just can't help but be impressed with this American spirit. And look, we have the same thing happening today. And I've had the sad duty of going with the president and also going on my own to represent the president up to Dover when we had the dignified transfer of the remains of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who've come home from the fights that we're having today. And you just have a sense of gratitude for their families and for their sacrifice. And I always have a prayer in my heart while the national anthem was playing and while TAPS was playing. I had a prayer in my heart for the souls of those young men who were lost and who fought so valiantly for our country, that showed the world what it means to be an American soldier, an American Marine. And I had a prayer in my heart for their family and their descendants, and also had a prayer of gratitude for what they were willing to do, the sacrifices that they were willing to make, so that we can enjoy the freedoms and my kids can enjoy the freedoms that we have today. So it's a very moving experience. I can't, I think everyone who was there, I'm sure Guy, you felt the same way. It's a special place, and it's a moving experience to be there to honor those fallen heroes. And I urge everybody who has the opportunity to visit, if you can't go overseas, to visit one of our national cemeteries and pay honor to the men and women who have fallen to keep us free if you have a chance, whether it's Memorial Day or just a weekend with your family, if you're in Washington, to go to Arlington, or if you're out in California, to go to the cemetery in Westwood or the many other cemeteries across the country and honor the men and women who've fallen to keep us free. It's a special opportunity for us.
President Trump's National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being so generous with your time on this trip and for including me on this trip.
Well, it was great to have you here, and you've got a great radio show and a long, amazing career ahead of you, and you're one of the voices that informs our country and carries on our belief in the American dream and equality and justice and liberty. And thank you for your voice. It's an important voice that you've got out there, Guy.
Very kind of you to say, sir. Thank you very much. And with that, we will step aside and take a break on The Guy Benson Show.